Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Adventures, and today it looks like we're doing part 51. Can't believe we made it this far of our Planet Zoo mod spotlight, where we take a look at some of the wonderful mods people have been making of the animals that live in the world around us. So, today we've got a lot of animals that are kind of returning, but a few new ones, which is also very awesome. But we're going to be starting off with the first one, the Andean Flamingo. We've got with Leaf here. Really nice remake here, it seems. So, the Andean flamingo is a species of flamingo, as you guessed it, native to the Andes, mountains of South America. And until 2014, they were classified in the genus Phoneticteris, and is closely related to the James flamingo. And the two, both the James flamingo and the Andean flamingo, make up the new genus Phoneticteris. And this species lives with a couple other species of flamingo. That includes the Chilean flamingo, which we'll cover next, the Andean flamingo itself, and the James flamingo. All live in the same sort of areas and all live in colonies, which is pretty cool. So these guys, you can tell from other flamingos that they've got more bluish, bright pinkish, face. And they've also got yellow going down their legs and all their webbed toes and all that. That's the main way you can tell them apart. They're also the largest flamingo in the Andes, and is actually the second largest, or the second heaviest flamingo, other than the most much taller greater flamingo, which is already in game. So it's kind of the second largest. And the body masses reaches from about 1.5 to 4.9 kilograms, or 3 to 10 pounds, and a height of 1.1 to 1.4 meters, or 3'3" to 4'7". And have a wingspan of 1.4 to 1.6, or 4'7" to 5'3" inches. So, pretty big birds. And these guys, like other birds, they are like other flamingos, they are filter feeders. So their diet ranges from basically anything they can filter. It ranges from plants, small vascular plants and algae, to smaller vertebrates, to even fish. They're pretty generalist in that way. It's just as long as they can filter it. And they feed from the bottom of the lakes, getting small particles and things like that, trying to sift through and find it. And when these guys are found with Chilean and James flamingos, they adopt different feeding patterns. So the Chilean flamingo use like moderate to deep foraging depths, and then the James flamingo will feed along the edge or in shallow water. It's not sure which ones the Andean themselves occupy, but it just seems they kind of work in where they can find space. That's niche petitioning, really. And a little known cool fact is that from their fossil history, it seems they may have lived around Salo de Encanta border near the early formative period, about 3,000 to 2,200 years ago. And it seems like using paleoclimate, this at the time, about 3,000 years ago, the climate of that area would have been very similar to where their modern range is now. So it's a good example to see how animals move and change over their history, which is very, very cool, if I do say so myself. Very wonderful flamingos. In terms of their habitat, as I mentioned, they live in the high Andes, and their mountain range from southern Peru to northwestern Argentina and northern Chile, and they are migratory, so they will fly up to 700 miles in a day and live around wetlands and salt marshes and kind of migrate from them. And usually in the summer, they'll live in the salt lakes up in the mountains, and then they'll migrate down to the wetlands in the winter. And the cause of this migration is due to the extreme aridity of the salt flats during the winter. And they don't know the exact flight patterns, but they often occur between the Chilean breeding grounds and the wetlands, and then the wetlands in southern, central and western Argentina down there. So these guys are considered a vulnerable species for a lot of reasons. Main reason is because of mining. A lot of mining really does help. Like the habitat of these flamingos is rich in boron, or specifically borax. And borax is very fatal in high doses to flamingos, but not humans. And it's been known to cause severe cardiovascular issues, such as bad issues with heart, also skeletal malformations and degradation of the testes. So it's very, very bad for flamingos. And obviously polluting these lakes with it really does hurt the populations. And not only that, there's also human disturbances. A lot of people, as I mentioned, taking their eggs and poaching them, since there's like a demand for them around the world, which is pretty sad. And tourism can also take a toll because of peat bogs have been developed as well. Infrastructure has really hurt them. They've been destroying their habitats as well. So it's really just a balancing act of all these things, especially unregulated tourism. people just going in and disturbing these birds because they're very sensitive when they're breeding. But luckily, there are some pretty good conservation plans. There's been lots of work going into them and protecting their habitats. So they're listed as vulnerable. They're still quite common, but there's still some serious conservation issues that need to be addressed, it seems. Yeah, really, really nice. So that was done by Leaf. Next one also done by Leaf. We've moved on from the Andean to the Chilean Flamingo. So another close relative of these guys. These are another large flamingo. They get 110 to 130 centimeters, I believe, tall, so 35 to 51 inches, and is closely related to the American flamingo and the greater flamingo, which is sometimes considered conspecific and is listed as near threatened. So these guys, to tell the difference from these guys in the Andean, they're differently related. The Andean flamingo is related to the James flamingo. These guys, as I mentioned, are more closely related to the American and greater flamingos. And these guys breed in South America, from Ecuador to Peru to Chile to Argentina and east of Brazil. And they've been actually introduced in the Netherlands, believe it or not. And these guys are slightly more pink, but slightly smaller than the greater flamingo. And they can be differentiated from the greyish legs and the pink joints that they have here. That's the main way you can tell them apart. And just like the Andean flamingo, the Chilean flamingo has a very, very similar diet where they use their comb-like structures in their mouth to filter feed, specifically algae, plankton, from coastal mudflats, estuaries, lagoons, and salt lakes around their habitat. And just like those other guys, they live in large flocks and they require crowded conditions to simulate breeding. And during the breeding season, the male will have all sorts of different displays and things, swinging their head from side to side, and wing salutes and things like that to try and get them to breed. And in captivity, have a poor record of breeding, and even in the wild, it's pretty poor. But that could be due to environmental conditions that need to be perfect for them to breed, really. And the males and females will construct this pillar-shaped mud nest, and they will both incubate the eggs that's laid by the female. And upon hatching, you can see the chicks here will have this greyish plumage, and they do not gain their typical adult coloration until they are like 2 or 3 years old. Because of things like getting the carotenoids from their food that they need to create that color. And both male and females can produce crop milk, which almost looks like blood. It's very, very odd looking. But it's very nutritious and they use it to feed their young. So yeah, very, very interesting flamingo. Very interesting close relative. So yeah, we've got them both covered. Both the Chilean and the Andean flamingo were done by Leaf, and they're a remake. And next we're moving on to another animal here that came out really well. Something a bit smaller this time, but it's still cool regardless. We have got here the Indian star tortoise. So these guys are a threatened tortoise species, or they're considered vulnerable, that are native to India, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and inhabit those dry areas and scrub forests around those areas. They've been listed as vulnerable since 2016. And the population is thought to comprise more than 10,000 individuals, but declining. They've also threatened with habitat loss and poaching with the illegal wildlife trade. And it was actually upgraded in CITES in 2019, so it has the highest level of protection that you can get for commercial trade, so that's very good. So you can see their name, the Indian star tortoise, comes from obviously them being native to India. You can see on their carapace, or their shell, they've got these wonderful patterns there that almost look like stars, so that's where they get the name the star tortoise. And they often form these humps, and it always looks quite bright. You can see all the plastron and things like that. It's really, really cool. And yeah, they get about 10 inches long, which I believe about 30 or 40 centimeters, so not particularly huge tortoises. And their patterning, as you can see, kind of breaks the outline, which helps create that star look, as I mentioned. And it's kind of used to help break the outline as they're hiding in a shade of grass so they don't get noticed by predators. And like other tortoises, they are mostly herbivorous, so they'll eat grasses, fallen fruits, flowers, succulent plants, but will actually occasionally eat carrion. And in captivity, they should probably never be fed meat, but in the wild, they will occasionally eat meat. And there is quite a bit of sexual dimorphism between adult Indian star tortoises, with females consistently larger than the males, or considerably larger. In addition, the females have much flatter plastrons, which is the bit on the bottom, like on their chest there. That little bottom bit there, that's the plastron. Much flatter than those of males, and the males will often have a convex shape in them, so they can better get on the female when mating. And they actually have presumably been specially adapted to try and so these guys can basically resist being turned over and get back up again. That's why the shell has been specifically designed for it, or through evolution. And it seems like they found many of them were self-righting, so it's kind of a really, really interesting way in evolution how they have designed their shells to help, if they ever fall on their side or they can't get up, it's kind of to help right them back up. So that's very, very interesting, if I do say so myself. But yeah, very cool little tortoise. They're common in the pet trade too, which is part of the issue. They've been obviously collected a lot. They are bred in captivity readily, so you should be able to get captive bred, and especially in some zoos and things like that. So yeah, very, very interesting. So it really came out well. That was by Leaf and Mega Rex Gaming. Both did an amazing job with that. And next we're going to move on to the next one done by Nicholas Lion Rider. He's remade it. The Golden Lion Tamarin. A very, very cool species here. How cute. So the Golden Lion Tamarin, also known as the Golden Marmoset, is a New World monkey, which is obviously a member of the tamarins or the marmosets. They're native to the Atlantic coastal forests of Brazil and are an endangered species, sadly. Their range of wild individuals is spread across 4 places in southeastern Brazil, and the recent census has been about a little over 3,000 individuals living in the wild, with a captive population of about 500 at about 150 zoos across the world. So where did they get their name, the Golden Lion Tamarin? It's kind of obvious. So you can see their coat is very bright orange or bright reddish. That's where they get the name Golden. And they have the lion tamarin, is that they have this really big mane on their face there that almost makes them look like a lion. So it's obviously very descriptive name, calling them the lion tamarin. Really helps you identify them. And they're actually pretty large. They typically get between 261 millimeters or 10 inches long and weigh about 620 grams. And they actually are among the largest marmoset that you could find. So they're quite big in marmoset standards. And they have what's called tingule, which is claw-like nails that they use to climb. And instead of the flat nails that we have, they use to climb and stuff. And they can move across small branches and run and stuff like that. And they actually move more similar to squirrels than primates. So that's very interesting. As I mentioned, they have a very, very limited range. They have a few small areas and protected areas where they live across a few different reserves, which is very sad. They used to be more common, of course. And they're typically found in lowland forests less than 300 meters above sea level, but can be found on hilltops and swamp forests. And in terms of their behavior, they're active for about 12 hours a day, and they use different sleeping dens each day. They kind of hang around and do their own things. During the beginning of the day, they will travel and feed on fruits. In the afternoon, they'll feed more on insects. And by late afternoon, they move to their night dens while they keep an eye out for predators and things. And they'll use hollow tree crevices, dense vines, and epiphytes as sleeping sites. That's where they'll try and hide them. And they tend to be active earlier and retire later in the winter. And winter times, the days are longer, so they tend to take their time during the year just to forage and do their own thing. So in terms of their diet, they're pretty generalist. They feed on almost anything. They'll feed on fruits, flowers, nectar, bird eggs, insects, and small vertebrates. And they rely on these microhabitats to try and find their prey. And they also been known to use their fingers to extract prey from like crevices and things, or under dead body growth, leaf growth, and in crevices and things, which is a behavior that's known as micromanipulation. And insects actually make up 10 to 15% of their diet, so they do eat a lot of fruit. Not fruit. They eat a lot of insects, and they will mainly eat fruit during the wet season, but the dry season they'll feed mostly on nectar and gum, which is pretty interesting. And these guys are pretty social. They live in groups from 2 to 8, and these groups consist of an adult male and the females, but they may have up to 2 to 3 males and a few females, depending whatever. Just pretty plastic. And other members can include subadults, and infants of either sex. And usually there's more than one breeding adult in the group, one is usually dominant over the other and is maintained through aggressive behavior. So that obviously they will, very similar to other primates. Oh, what are these weird climbing going on? Anyway, we'll have a look over here. So usually the males, when they get too big and grow up, they'll get kicked out of their group and they have to go find another one or make their own, which is very interesting. And in terms of reproduction, they are largely monogamous, and when there's 2 adult males in one group, only one of them will mate with the female. And these cases of mating, male mating with 2 females, usually mother and daughter, And their reproduction is seasonal and usually depends on the rainfall, with mating at its highest around the raining season, between late March and mid-June, and births peak about September to February. And females are sexually mature between the ages of 15 to 20 months, but isn't until the 30 months of age that they can reproduce, and only the dominant females can reproduce and will suppress the other females in their group from breeding. So it's very interesting. Tamarins usually have a 4-month gestation period, and golden line-top tamarins will often take care of the dominant female's young, so basically the whole group will take care of her baby. So it's very interesting. And this is due to the fact that tamarins often give birth to twins in the wild, and even triplets or quadruplets. That is semi-common. And the younger members of the group may lose breeding opportunities, but they gain the experience of taking care of their mother's baby and help rearing their younger siblings. So it does work out in the end that even if they don't get to breed, they still learn how to take care of their siblings. And in the first 4 weeks, they're completely dependent on their mother, which they nurse or carry on her. But in week 5, they spend less time on their mother's back and they explore their surroundings. And when they reach about their juvenile stage at 17 weeks, they will socialize. And when they're a subadult at 14 months, they kind of do their adult thing. That's when they start to become adults. So in terms of a little fact, they actually have a mutualistic relationship with 96 species of plants in the Atlantic forests. So they're very important, like other species, for speed and dispersal on things, and helps propagate certain plant species. So that's very, very important, especially endangered ones. And as I mentioned, in terms of conservation, a lot of the issues they face is illegal logging, poaching, mining, urbanization, the pet trade, deforestation. A lot of those issues have really compounded and really helped make them endangered, sadly. But luckily, there is a good captive population, as we mentioned, and there have been lots of reintroductions and translocations across their native range to try and add new genes into the native populations, or to move populations to safer places so they can breed. So even though they are considered endangered, they are increasing. So it's very, very good to see. And yeah, I think this will be the end for the Tamarin. Again, done by Nicholas Lionrider. Very, very awesome job. And next we're going to be moving on from Buff Zoo and Genora Pizza made a really, really interesting fish here. We've got the American paddlefish. So very, very cool fish here. So the American paddlefish is a ray fin fish that's closely related to sturgeons. And these guys have a very, very long history. They date back to the early Cretaceous, about 125 million years ago. And the American paddlefish, as you can see, is quite smooth-skinned. It's a freshwater fish called a paddlefish, and is often referred to as the spoonbill, the Mississippi paddlefish, or the spoon-billed cat, even though it's not related to catfish. This is the only believed living species of its group, the Polydontidae, and the only recent surviving member, sadly, was the presumed now extinct Chinese paddlefish. It only was declared extinct a couple of years ago. It could potentially be still alive in small numbers, but it's declared extinct just because of no one's really seen them for a while. They only lived in the Yangtze River in China, which of course is quite well polluted now. And the American paddlefish is often referred to as a primitive or relic species because of the morphological characteristics you can see here is quite similar to its extinct relatives, which is very interesting, such as its skeleton being entirely cartilaginous, so it's no bone itself, it's all cartilage, and has this paddle-shaped rostrum, as you can see here, which extends to nearly 1/3 of their body. It's similar to their relatives. It's often been referred to as well as a freshwater shark, quote-unquote, because of its heterocentral tail and its caudal fin, though it's not really closely related to them much at all. And the American paddlefish is actually highly derived, even though it looks ancient, and it's evolved with adaptations for filter feeding. As you can see, its rostrum and cranium have like 10,000s of sensory receptors on it that is used to try and find plankton and zooplankton and things, which is their main food source, and where they go and find food. So very interesting. And the American paddlefish is native to the Mississippi River and the basin, and is freely, under relatively natural, unaltered conditions, existed around to the prior 1900s. So now they often commonly inhabit like large, free-flowing rivers, braided channels, backwaters, and oxbow lakes throughout the Mississippi River drainage basins and the adjacent Gulf. with occurrences in place like Lake Huron and Lake Helgen until about 90 years ago. But their populations, they are considered vulnerable. Their populations have declined dramatically because of overfishing, habitat destruction, and pollution. Often poaching as well as a contributing factor to the decline, and it's continued because they are needed for caviar or wanted for caviar. So in a lot of places that they used to live, they've been extirpated. So they used to live in New York, Maryland, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and as I mentioned, they lived in Canada, in Lake Helen and Huron until about 90 years ago, sadly. But they have been reintroduced in some places at least, the Ohio River systems, the Monongahela and Algalga, I believe you pronounced that. But their current range is pretty much restricted to the Mississippi River and the Missouri River tributaries and the Mobile Basin, Bay Drainage Basin. And they're currently found around 22 states in the United States and are protected under law, both federal, state, and international law. So they are a protected species, so you need to be very careful about what you do with them. But luckily there is very good conservation work going to protect these guys. Really, really awesome fish. Genora Pizza and Buffsu did a wonderful job. So now we're going to move on to another really cool animal. We've got the Nubian Ibex, also done by Nicholas Lionrider and Leaf. I believe this is a older port. Really wonderful big male here. Look how wonderful he looks. So these guys are a desert-dwelling goat that is found in northern and northeastern Africa and the Middle East. And they were often considered a subspecies of the alpine ibex, but they're now considered a distinct species. And their worldwide population is a little over 1,000 individuals. So they are considered vulnerable. So you can see the Nubian Ibex itself stands about 65 to 75 centimeters tall, or about 2.1 to 2.6 feet tall at the shoulder, and weigh about 50 kilograms. And they've got this quite light tan color with a white underbelly, and males have this dark brown stripe down their banks as well. And you can see they have these quite long, thin horns, where the males they can reach about 1 meter in length, while the females are much smaller, about 30 centimeters. And their range at the moment consists about Egypt, Jordan, Oman, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Sudan, and Yemen, and have been extirpated from Lebanon, and it's not known whether their presence is in Ethiopia, and have been introduced to Syria, so that's very, very cool. So like other ibex species, they live in dry mountainous terrain where they eat mainly grasses and leaves, and are preyed upon by animals such as leopards, wolves, common foxes, eagles, and vultures. And they are social and herds animals, which consist of females, young, and males up to 3 years old. And then once the males get old enough, they go and find their own bands and live with them about groups of 8. And during the breeding season, the males will join up with the females, and they'll rut and fight each other for the best females. And do all that. And they are diurnal, so it means they're active during the day and rest during the night. And they are considered vulnerable because they have less than 10,000 mature individuals in the wild. And they face competition and contamination with livestock, hunting pressure as well, and habitat destruction is a big issue for them. And in terms of cultural significance, in Yemen, they've been a long-standing symbol of the national identity, which is pretty cool. Have a look at the... Oh, that's not what we wanted. We have a look at the baby. Because they're cute. Little kid. Really, really cute. They've been considered quite positive, and also the annual National Ibex Day on the 22nd of January has been proposed to help the animal as well. But yeah, very, very cool Nubian Ibex. Really came out well, I think. So now we're going to move on to the next animal. We've got the Roosevelt Elk by Noah Waller. Really came out wonderfully, I think. So big, wonderful elk. So this is the Roosevelt Elk, or Cervus canadensis roosevelti. Also known as the Olympic elk, or the Roosevelt's waipati, so, to not to be confused with the Eurasian elk, which is a moose. Very confusing common name sometimes. They are considered the largest of the 4 subspecies of elk in North America by body mass, though those subspecies are very, very contested because they only got to America about 15,000 years ago. These guys being the largest. Mature bulls can get between 700 and 1,200 pounds, with rare large bulls getting bigger. And they're typically found around the temperate rainforests of the Pacific Northwest, including parts of Northern California, and also introduced into Canada, in the Kodak, Raspberry, and Escoff Islands in 1928, and reintroduced into the British Columbia's Sunshine Coast and Vancouver Island in 1986. So, as I mentioned, these guys, as Roosevelt Elks, they get quite big. They get about 6 to 10 feet long, or 1.8 to 3 meters long. They stand about 2.5 to 5.6 feet tall, or 0.75 to 1.7 meters tall at the withers. So about the shoulder there. We'll have a look at the females. Well, I don't want you sitting down. I want you to do your thing. It is wonderful female hair. And Roosevelt Elk males generally get between 700 and 1,100 pounds, 300 to 500 kilograms, while the cows get between 575 and 625, or 260 to 285 kilograms. And some mature males have got really big, especially on Raspberry Island, about 600 kilograms or 1,300 pounds. So, in terms of diet, not too different from other elk subspecies, quote-unquote. They feed on herbaceous plants, such as grasses and sedges. During the winter months, they feed mainly on wooded plants, including like highbush, cranberry, elderberry, devil's club, and new seedlings of things like a red cedar and Douglas fir. And they've also been known to eat things like blueberries, mushrooms, lichens, and salmon berries, so that's pretty cool. I'll have with the baby as well as we're talking about them. So wild, these guys rarely live for between 12 and 15 years, but in captivity they can live quite long and live about 25 years. And as I mentioned, this elk subspecies is being reintroduced into the British Columbia Sunshine Coast in the Vancouver Island in 1986. So not too dissimilar from other elk subspecies. Really cool. It really came out well. I believe Narwaller made this, and he updated it to fit the European fallow deer rather than the reindeer, and I think it's come out much better. Really did a good job at updating these wonderful elk. Did a great job. Very, very great. Same with the red deer as well in the last episode. And now we've got another updated animal. Very, very awesome. One of my favorites, we have got the Gower. So Gower is back. And we'll look at the big male here, and there's the female, I think. There's the big male. What are you doing in the corner there? Let's get you out of the corner. Come on, come on, come on. Walk out of the corner. We'll do that then. So we got this wonderful Gower here, which was made by Leaf and Monsoon, remade. This is also known as the Indian bison, and they're native to South and Southeast Asia, and have been listed as vulnerable since 1986. The global population for these guys is estimated to be about 21,000 mature individuals in 2016, and has declined more than 70% in the last 3 generations, and has been extirpated from Sri Lanka and most likely Bangladesh, sadly. But luckily, in protected areas, their numbers are going up, so that's good. So they're the largest species, ironically, between all the bovids, and they're also called the Seladang in Myanmar. And they're quite large. They're the largest extant bovid. They're very, very massively built, huge. And they also have this quite distinctive dewlap that's believed to be used for thermoregulation. And they have quite a short coat that rather exposes their muscles. They're like bodybuilder bison because they're quite a short coat. Their head to body length is about 250 to 330 centimeters, or 8 feet 2 to 10 feet 10, and about 70 to 105 centimeter tail, and stand about 142 to 220 centimeters, or 56 to 87 inches high at the shoulder, and average about 168 in females and 188 in males. And you can see the top of the muscular hump here is just under 200 centimeters, so about here. And males get enormous. Males get about 1/4 larger than heavier than the females, with body masses for the males ranging between 440 to 1,000 kilograms, or 970 to 220,000 pounds, and adult females get between 588 to 1,500 kilos. No, wrong way. The body mass for females is 1,000 kilograms, and the males get between 588 and 1,500. Between 1,296 and 3,307 pounds in adult males. So the males can get over 1.5 tons, so very, very huge. And as I mentioned, they're kind of found around Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Malaysia, mainly around Southeast Asia and India, where they get the name Indian bison, where they tend to live in deciduous forests and plains. They're pretty generalist in that regard, and they're around there. And the India, the population is estimated to be about 22,000 or 12,000, depending. And they live in protected areas, so they're not doing too bad. And in terms of their ecology, they are diurnal, but in areas where there's lots of people around, they tend to become nocturnal to avoid people. And they're most active during the day, and they're really seen out after 8 o'clock. And during the dry season, they congregate into small areas and where they weather out monsoons. And very, very cool. And in terms of their feeding ecology, I mean, they feed on like upper portions of plants, they like leaf blades, stems, grass seeds. Pretty generalist in that regard. They'll browse as well, and all that. And in terms of their reproduction, they will breed in their second or third year of life. We'll find the baby while we're talking about them. Look at these little cutie. So they breed during their second or third year of life, which takes place year-round, but they typically peaks to December and June. Females have one calf, really two, after gestation about 275 days, and a few days less than a domestic cattle, and they typically wean after 7 to 12 months, and the lifespan can be up to 30 years. So in terms of their herd ecology, they tend to live with a herd of adult females, which is a matriarch who leads a herd of females, where the males will go off and do their own thing. But when it's time for breeding season, the males will come around to the females and fight for the right to breed, where they obviously go and breed. Very interesting. And in being so large, they have very, very few natural predators, especially for an adult Gower. What's up with that today? An adult Gower can defend against most things, but really only tigers and saltwater crocodiles can kill adult Gowers. But females or young calves have been killed by leopards, dholes, and large muggo crocodiles. And in terms of threats, they are highly susceptible to things like poaching, habitat destruction, and the pet trade, or the food trade, really. In 1990s, they were specifically sought out by Vietnamese poachers for their commercial value, and they've often been considered for meats and trophies, because they're a big, impressive bull. How can you blame them? But luckily, they are protected in most of their range, and hunting's not a particularly big thing around their area, but still really, really wonderful animal there. I'm a big fan of the Gower, and Leafer Monsoon, you did a wonderful job. And last, but most certainly not least, we've got Biceth, Buffsu, and Whalebite. We have got the Ganges River Dolphin, which are all hanging out on the land for some reason. Here we are. This is the Ganges River Dolphin that came out rather well. So these guys are a species of toothed whale that live in the family Plantastidae, which is a group of like Asian river dolphins. They live in the Ganges and related rivers in Southeast Asia, mainly countries such as India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. And they're related to the much smaller Indus River dolphin, which was considered a subspecies, I believe, which lives in the Indus River in Pakistan and northwestern India. So these guys split from the Indus River dolphin during the Pleistocene about 550,000 years ago, and they were initially considered a single species, as I mentioned, Fantastia gigantea, which was 1970s split into distinct species, and again grouped, and now they've been obviously been split again. And the earliest fossil identified of these species is only about 12,000 years old. So as I mentioned, they live in the Ganges River and related rivers. They also favor places like deep pools, eddy concurrents, and located downstream, and they tend to prefer these kind of small areas. And you can see they have quite a rectangular dorsal fin, and the females tend to be a little larger than the males. They're usually tan, chocolate brown, or light blue in color, and have these large elongated beaks with these great big pointed teeth, which is not really shown in here, but they don't really have lips. They have really, really big pointed teeth there. They also have a large melon here, which is like a special fat blob in its head that is used for echolocation, because they cannot see well in the cloudy water. And they get quite large. An adult Ganges River dolphin can get between 2.2 to 2.6 meters long, about 7 to 8 feet. And the oldest individual was about a 28-year-old male that measured 199 centimeters in length. The Ganges River dolphin are usually found in pairs or single, and they're not known to do many acrobatic movements near boats and stuff. They're a lot more shy around people, that they have been known to breach, which is quite rare. They often use avoidance behavior, the object's avoidance, because they have the echolocation to blast sound around the water so they can find their way around the muddy water. But they really do, they can click and burst and twitter. So very similar to Amazonian river dolphins, even though they're not closely related at all. And they use this echolocation to kind of figure out where they are, as I mentioned. And they use this echolocation for population surveys, but it has been developed and it's not heavily used because of cost. But it seems that they are endangered, I believe. Yeah, they are endangered because of things. Let's have a look at the baby while we find reproduction. Where is the baby? Where's the baby? There is a baby. Is that a baby? That's an adult. We want to find the baby. There we are. Look at this little cutie. So, in terms of reproduction, they do not have a specific mating season, but they are born after 8 to 12 months after conception, and will stay for their mother a year. In terms of their diet, they will eat crustaceans, prawns, carp, mashare, and even small sharks such as the Ganju shark, and may also take birds and turtles, and are very, very generalist. But in terms of conservation, a 2017 population assessment estimated to be less than 3,500 within their range using surveys. But luckily they have been considered pretty much commercial trading is prohibited, so they are fully protected under law, I believe. But most of the issues these guys have faced is mainly due to pollution and overfishing for oil. And entanglement in nets is another bad thing. And their meat has often been used as catfish and things. Also poisoning the water supply has been a big issue for them. But luckily, in 2013, the India's Ministry for the Environment and Forest has declared dolphins non-human persons and has forbidden them to be kept in captivity. So that could be helpful to these guys, as it kind of doesn't let them have a backup population, though that some people would disagree with that, of course. But now that they have kind of legal personhood, that helps bring more protection to them. And are very, very respected in terms of their cultural impact. So very, very cool animals. I'm a big fan of the Ganges dolphins. So yeah, really wonderful. Again, that was made by Seth, Buffsu, and Whalebite. Whalebite's kind of a new guy, but he's been around since Zoo Tycoon. Really, really awesome. So I believe this would be a great place to end the video. So yeah, I really, really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe, and bye-bye.